In this video, we'll show you how to create a puffer jacket and provide you with some useful tips and tricks when working with puffy properties in V-Stitcher. We'll start by loading pre-made pattern pieces of a jacket with a smart zipper assigned to it. There are two main points when creating a puffy garment: quilting lines and fabric physics. Let's start with quilting lines. We'll select the edges of the front and back pieces of the jacket and click on Clone Edges by Offset in the context view. We'll set the distance to be 13 centimeters. Check the Extend to Edges box and enter 3 copies. Next, we'll do the same for the front upper pattern pieces. Only this time we'll create vertical lines and decrease the distance between lines to be 7 centimeters. We'll set the sleeves the same as the main body pieces. For the back upper piece, we'll use the pen tool to draw the first line. We'll use the Extend Shrink to Edges feature, and then we'll clone the line by offset. We'll use the same technique for the hood. Note that the quilting lines can be parallel or perpendicular to the grain line. We'll draw a horizontal line to the centerpiece of the hood and extend it to edges, then we'll clone the line by offset. Next, we'll select the edges around the facial area and clone these by 2 centimeters. Lastly, we'll draw and clone another line on the side of the hood. These horizontal lines are crossing the lines we made in a previous step. Now let's move its position. When defining the starting point of the lines on the side pattern pieces of the hood, it's handy to disable glue in the context view, so we can edit their length accordingly. Note, if the quilting lines are spaced too close together, V-Stitcher is unable to successfully simulate a puffy insulated fabric between them, regardless of the puffy firmness applied. Now we'll move to the second point, setting the fabric physics. We'll go to Physics and enable puffy firmness. The puffy function creates 2 separate layers from a single pattern piece automatically. Note that using the puffy feature in a garment creates a large file and uses an increased amount of processing power during simulation. So it's better to start simulating with the fast mode enabled and change to a normal mode once the overall simulation is finished. In addition to the puffy, we'll increase the thickness of the fabric. Remember, complex garments may take more time to simulate. Now let's simulate. As you can see, the jacket has puffed out, but the internal lines seem to have no effect. Let's multi-select these internal lines and change them into quilting lines by giving them puffy properties in the context view. That's better. Quilting lines create sharp creases where they stitch on a puffy fabric. To create a smoother transition at quilting lines on a puffy fabric, use the Smooth feature. We can choose to smoothen the transition of the inner, outer, or both sides of the fabric. Now we'll edit the fabric physics. When setting a puffy fabric, we'll focus on thickness and puffy firmness values. These two are interrelated, and the result of the puffy fabric differs based on the values you type in. The thickness refers to the overall thickness, including the insulation width. It's not the thickness of the fabric itself. Puffy firmness controls how stiff and puffed out the fabric is. Let's simulate. The following image is an overview of a different fabric physics. It displays the effects of a combination of selected puffy firmness values and puffy thickness values. If the puffy fabrics do not appear true to life after simulation, you may need to adjust the firmness of the fill to achieve the desired effect. Quilting lines that are closer together may simulate puffy differently from a wider quilt on a fabric with the exact same puffy firmness and puffy thickness value. We want to achieve a similar puffy appearance, but with closer quilting lines for the bust and the hood. Let's start with the fabric for the bust. We'll clone the fabric, then rename the material, and change the physical properties accordingly. Then assign the fabric to the pattern pieces. We'll do the same for the hood pieces. For an even more realistic look, we can add more creases to the quilting lines. We'll do that by multi-selecting the quilt lines, then enabling Shrink by 2 to 10% depending on the look we want to achieve. Puffy garments can either be sewn through or have baffle boxes. By default, quilting lines sew the inner and outer fabric through. To create a baffle box, we'll need to set up a baffle wall height in the context view. The baffle wall height must be lower than the fabric thickness, otherwise the effect won't be visible. Now let's update the simulation again. Great! Under Edge Properties, there's another useful tool which is great to work with. This feature is called Finish Effect, and it allows you to configure unstitched puffy edges to be either rounded or sharp. The Finish Effect increases the authentic display of the puffy garments. By default, it is set to rounded. Here we're moving the quilting lines inside the hood pattern piece to be evenly distributed. Next, we'll enhance the jacket by adding some top stitching. We'll select the seam we want to use from the Resource tab and assign it to the quilting lines. Now we'll use the cut marks to achieve a jacket with lining that's different from the outer fabric. First, we'll use the pen tool and draw a guiding line for the lining. We'll convert it into internal line, shrink it to edge, and mirror the shape on the other side. Then we'll multi-select the internal lines and change them into cut marks. Now we'll enable the fabric's visibility in the 2D window. Let's clone the fabric and change its backside to a new color. Note that you can also use different artworks and all-over prints for both face and backside of the fabric. Let's assign the newly created fabric and check out the inner pattern pieces in the 2D window. Unzip the jacket, hide the avatar, and check out the lining. And there you have it, a puffer jacket created in V-Stitcher. Next, we'll show you how to add an extra layer into the puffy garment. Each puffer garment is different, and even though we recommend using only one layer pattern piece as the puffy physics automatically creates a second layer, sometimes the design requires an extra layer. For example, if you want to create a more detailed garment, such as adding open mesh pockets, partial lining in the collar and hood area, or full body lining with inner zipper pockets, you will need to add that extra layer. Now let's see how to create body lining with an inner pocket. We'll copy and paste the front and back pattern pieces and move them to a lower 3D layer. We'll then slice the lines we want to use and delete those we won't need anymore. Next, we want to simplify the front pattern pieces, so we'll merge the upper and bottom parts together. After merging, we can delete the unused separated pattern pieces. Delete the pattern pieces from the left side, and use a Symmetry tool to get new ones. By using the Symmetry tool, all the changes we make on one side will automatically apply to the other side. This works for the pattern pieces and their stitching. Delete any unnecessary corner points, change the curved type of the points to smooth, and tweak the shapes of the front lining. Repeat these steps for all parts that were merged together. It's easier to work with clean geometry with the fewest points possible. Let's stitch the lining together, and then stitch the pattern pieces of the lining to the outer fabric. Because the outer part consists of the upper and bottom pattern pieces, but the lining is only one piece, we'll use multiple stitches for these edges. To speed up our workflow, we'll use the mouse button instead of clicking the buttons in the context view or horizontal menu. We'll stitch the rest of the edges together. Sometimes the stitching might cross. We'll fix that by flipping the stitch direction in the context view. We'll create a new fabric for the lining in the inner pocket. Clone the outer fabric, open the physics settings, and disable the puffy firmness. And also change its thickness. Now let's recolor the fabric to some darker shade. Assign the newly created fabric to the lining pattern pieces. Here's a quick tip. If you want to create a new fabric with the same physics, but in a different color, there's a faster way than cloning the original fabric. Just choose a color from the color palette or library and pull it over the pattern piece you want. We forgot to stitch the bottom edges, so we'll do it now. Let's resimulate the garment. After the simulation is finished, we'll use the styling tool to smooth the jacket and resimulate. There's some excessive fabric in the length of the lining. To make it visibly more pleasing, we'll select the bottom edges of the pattern pieces and shorten them a bit with the slide tool enabled. Here's a tip. When using the Move tool, we can multi-select pieces and move them together. Let's simulate. The lining looks great. Now we'll add a pocket to the lining. We'll cancel symmetry between the lining pieces and draw a line with the pen tool. Then we'll slice the pattern piece and add corner points to its edges. We'll add 4 more corner points with a sharp curve. So when we'll move their position, we'll create a space that fits the zipper shape. Let's assign the zipper. Change its width so it corresponds to the pattern pieces, and simulate. We need to display the zipper inside, so with the zipper selected, we'll click Move to Inside in the context view. We'll hide the front pattern pieces on the right side to have a better view. As you can see, the zipper puller is missing. Select the zipper, and in the context view, flip its position. And there you have it, an easy way to create an extra lining layer inside the puffer jacket. If you want to take this a step further, why not add different 3D trims and labels to level up your design? And remember, puffiness is for visualization purposes only. We cannot measure how much downfill we need for a physical sample. For more information, go to support.browseware.com.